Thank you again, Godfrey, for consistency. Now, talking about consistency as an element in research, maybe that's where we can start. Actually, Samora, how are you? Let's just check the element of consistency, which is part of reliability. Samora, how are you? I remember this name that last week we didn't have a moment to chat. Samora?
Hello, we chatted. Hello, how are you, Prof?
Good. We chatted last week briefly, right?
Yes, we did.
Let's talk about consistency in research or reliability in research. What is your
Right.
understanding?
My understanding is consistency in research.
Yeah, as one of the element in research, how do you understand it?
I haven't really thought about it.
Or reliability.
Reliability, obviously, your sources, where you source your information, you need to always source from reliable sources and obviously reliable information that can be checked and can be verified by obviously verifiable sources that can be checked.
Yeah, but let's talk about the principle of consistency in research or reliability in research. There's two things we spoke about, we'll repeat again, validity and reliability. I'm not talking reliable sources. I'm talking about when we say your research is reliable and valid, or it satisfies the requirements of validity and reliability. When you talk about reliability, what do we mean? I was just saying now that we're grateful for Godfrey to be so consistent in putting this together. Now, then I was reminded today we will also be ironically talking about consistency or reliability. What do you understand that to mean in research? If we say
Uh,
your study, if we talk about your study being reliable or your study being, like meeting the requirements of consistency, what comes to mind?
no, I don't, I'm a bit confused in terms of how to answer the question.
Oh, okay. Good. Please, when we end the session, let us know if you you have a better understanding, because this is where you start, right? We are measuring you as we start, and then we want to measure you when we finish the session. How's that?
That's fine.
So basically, we're doing a pre-test.
Post it.
This is where you are now on reliability. Then we'll do the intervention, and then we do the post-test.
That's cool.
Is it okay? Okay,
That's
let's
good.
try. Let's try Pule. Remind us, Pule, that when we're done, we'll test. We'll retest. We'll retest Samora on this. Pule, yes. What is your understanding of reliability or consistency in research?
Okay, I would say my understanding would be that with reliability, in that your research, if it is tested by a peer or a colleague, they must be able to come to the same conclusion as you have arrived at.
Repeat that.
I'm saying your research must be able to be tested by your peers in that they must be able to come to the same conclusion you arrived at.
Yeah, I think you're getting it right.
Mhm.
You do you want to motivate some more? Maybe just so that I know it's not an examination, but we want you to take us through as to what do you mean by. I think you got it right, but maybe
Mm.
if you can just expand a little bit more.
Okay, based on last week's discussion, for example, like for example, if I came to a certain conclusion, I must be wary of there's certain factors that came into my conclusion. For example, times might have changed in between when my findings are being tested by a peer. So there's a number of factors that come to play in terms of also the circumstances when I arrived at that conclusion and the changes. But however, consistency will be me being able to basically, a colleague would be able to come to the same conclusion. Obviously, taking into consideration those factors that might have changed in between when I came to that conclusion and when they did their findings.
Okay, and these factors could possibly influence your, the findings under different times. I would imagine.
Yes, correct.
Happy, go for it.
Thank you, Prof. I want to talk about the element of consistency. According to my understanding, for example, it has to do when, for example, if you've chosen the type of a certain type of methodology wherein you have to strictly adhere to it throughout your research. And another thing, the element of, the citation, the mode of citation that you might have chosen, you also have to adhere to it as well. That's my understanding on that element.
So if Godfrey, as a case study today, is organizing this engagement Tuesday between 5:30, say, to 7:30, what would you say about that? Applying
Sorry,
the same,
Prof.
yeah, applying the same discussion you are raising. I want to know if Godfrey from UNISA is arranging this engagement every Tuesday between 5:30 and 7:30. How do you apply that conversation into it?
You mean the conversation of consistency and reliability?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because I
Prof,
want you
as
to
I've
apply it. I want you to apply it in this so that I can see how it relates, to what we are busy with right now.
I don't know, maybe I'm getting lost now. But I just wanted to indicate from my side how I understand the element of consistency. As I've given the example of
Yes, I
methodology.
agree with you, but I'm saying, I agree with you. I'm saying we now know the methodology of this engagement, that it is almost happening every Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30. So we all know that, right? So we can expect that.
Yes.
I'm asking, how do you apply this to the situation, that which you've just said? How would you relate to what is happening on a weekly basis from what I'm gathering from you?
Maybe I can invoke the element of continuous participation, or maybe strictly adhering to your schedule in order to achieve your destination.
What will happen if he decides, if he just decides, okay, this next Tuesday we're going to have this session between 1 and 3, for example? What
Yes.
did you say to that? Is he consistent?
It will no longer be. It will be now inconsistent with regard to the aspect of time.
Why is that inconsistent? If 1 to 3 is not consistent with 5 to 5:30 to 7:30, why are you saying that?
Because I might have already adjusted to the time of 17:30 to 19:30 on every Tuesday. So maybe it might otherwise inconvenience me, that time schedule.
So you're getting used to the fact that the engagement is every Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30, and when he does that repeatedly, so it is becoming consistent, isn't it?
Yes, Prof.
Now, when he changes the day and he changes the time, that will now become inconsistent, isn't it?
It absolutely, Prof.
So the reliability element of your, and I think somebody said it, is saying, look, if you if you take the process, you follow the same process consistently, almost it becomes something that you can expect that you'll get the same results, isn't it? When you do something over and over, the results might probably be the same over and over. Would you not agree to that?
I agree, Prof.
So how then can you explain to Samora the principle of consistency or reliability or repeatability or reproducibility of the study? What comes to mind now that we're trying to grapple with this concept?
Maybe to summarize it, I can simply say you have to stick to your research design or structure.
Okay. We'll come back to it, but I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make the principle of reliability and validity in research as simple as possible. Because remember, now we did it. So by the end of the day, we need to do another test where it say, oh, the penny has dropped. Until the penny drops, we're not going to let go of this. Pule, good. Are you going to try to simplify this principle that we're trying to simplify for ourselves, reliability or consistency?
Simplified. Obviously, I'm gonna speak in very general terms. But I'm also like interested to hear what, like at the end of the engagement, how my understanding will be.
Lionel, how are you today?
I'm good as always. I'm busy
Great.
training. I'm busy also training this week. I'm training advocates. So I'm not a professor, but I'm a trainer.
You don't need to be anything to be a trainer. You can train because you've got knowledge of the field that you are working in, so
yeah,
it's acceptable.
Yeah, I actually laughed today. I spoke to some of my students and they see that they reckon I could be a judge or a magistrate. So I just laughed. I said, I think I'm more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is quite interesting when people look up to you, but I know you know it. Yeah. Yes. So what do you want to ask me today? You're always picking on me, like my students say. So today I'm getting picked on, like I pick on some of my students. But I say to them, I don't pick on you. I'm trying to assist you, and I think you're going to tell me exactly the same. So I don't think people always understand why you ask them questions, because you want them to progress. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah, I want your research to be. I mean, it's your own research anyway. So I want it to be more solid, and you are able to defend it when you have to defend it, but also to advance it even further to make it much more exciting, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Like when you teach the students, obviously you want them to be better at their craft and to even surpass what is commonly known in that field at any given stage. There's always an opportunity to be better. I wanted you to tell me your understanding of a principle in research which you call reliability or consistency. What is your general understanding?
Well, the reliability, sorry, I've spoken so much today. The reliability obviously is the level of quality over time. So you're trying to maintain it. Opposed to consistency is to make sure that it is consistent, what you're trying to do. So in other words, when you do your research and when your peers are testing it, that your outcome is consistent, and obviously if it's consistent, then it will be reliable. To put it in short, so
if you do one thing over and over, Lionel,
Yes, I'm listening.
Would you expect, obviously, similar results over and over? Because you do it the same way, right?
Exactly. And that
So if you
will
do
make
the
it
same
reliable.
thing, if you do the same thing over and over, you should then be expecting similar results over and over. Is that reliability?
Exactly.
That's consistency, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean,
now, if somebody comes,
yes.
Sanjuga comes, and she follows your way of doing things, and she does that over and over. Is she expecting similar results or different results? Although she comes 5 years later.
Well, it also depends, because if she takes my research, she most probably will get the same results over and over. But it also depends on if somebody else has come to a different conclusion, and possibly there might be different results. So the consistency can obviously also be affected in terms of the type of research that you do and how you present it. Because I'll give you an example. If I take the director's liability, like my topic is, as everybody knows, if I take it in South Africa and I go and suddenly try to compare it to Canada, for instance, then you must be careful, because the reliability will be different, most probably in another jurisdiction. But if we take the sampling in South Africa, maybe you do it in different provinces or different regions, you might most probably find that could be more consistency, because there are variables also involved here. And I think that's where, in my view, we must be careful that we don't expect absolute consistency, but the regular consistency possibly. And then by having that, then it could be more reliable in terms of what the outcome is of your research. So that is my view, and I might have a very very interesting view, but that's the way that I see it.
Fair enough. Let's do it again. Fair enough. Let's do it again. Let's do it again, because I want this principle to be properly understood, and you've got valid point. But before we go and diverse, let's first bet the principle. One, I'm saying, if you do something as Lionel, you do it over and over, is it fair for me to expect the same outcomes of that same thing that you are doing over and over?
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
That's reliability. That's reproducibility. That's repeatability of what you're doing.
That's correct.
Now, 10 years down the line, I bring in Sanjuga, and Sanjuga does exactly what you have been doing, and she does it consistently. Should she expect the same results as the results you got or not? Just at face value.
Based on my research, yes, you should.
Yeah. Well, not even on your research. I'm just saying, based on what you were doing, she does exactly what you've been doing, and she does it so consistently over the time, over and over, so she can expect the same results as the results that you got, isn't it?
That's correct.
So then 15 years down the line, Samora comes, and Samora takes your situation. She looks at Sanjuga's situation, which look pretty much the same, and she does exactly what both of you have done, and he does it over and over. Can he also expect similar results, although the circumstances are different and times are different, but doing exactly the same thing?
They should be able to.
Correct. That's what reliability is meant to do. The reliability of a study means if you follow the method, the methodology, and everything else that the previous researcher has done, right? Ideally, you should come to the same conclusion, because it talks to reproducibility. You can reproduce the same, is a repeatability. You can repeat the same thing. So it's basically the consistency of the results. Now, you're right. If everything else is equal, that should be the situation. Does it make sense to you correct. And to others? So in other words, first, before we go and say what can go wrong and what can go right, let's first say, if you do the same thing over and over, you should expect the same results over and over. And if another researcher comes and he follows exactly what you are doing, they should also come up to the same conclusion as yourself, because they are doing exactly what you are doing, even if they are doing that under different times and circumstances might be different, but the results will pretty much be the same. Does it make sense? Pule,
Yes.
are you able to give us an indication, even though you are in the office? Does it make sense to you as well?
Yes, it does make sense. I mean,
So
it's
that's the first thing. That's the first thing that you want to do. Consistency simply means if every Friday or every Tuesday 5:30 you are here, it then becomes something that you do so consistent that every Tuesday 5:30 you are here. So now it then if that changes, if Godfrey was to decide, oh no, now we are going to do 10 to 12, obviously that will disrupt your planning. So in other words, it will disrupt the way in which you are structuring your day, because you have already developed some kind of a pattern where you are beginning to think every Tuesday, this time and this time I should be engaging on my research and so on. That's what consistency and reliability is meant to say in a broad sense. So we are not going to be talking yet on what can go wrong. We're still talking about if I do exactly what you told me to do in exactly the same measure at the same time and everything else being the same, the result will be pretty much the same, irrespective of who's doing it, because we are following the same procedure. It's almost like if I were to use another analogy, where, for example, you buy a television, they would give you the step-by-step on how to switch it on so you can at least enjoy the pleasure of watching it. Now, they assume that you are going to follow those step-by-step. So step 1, step 2, up until step last. Now, when you followed all those steps and you switch it on, you expect to see some magic there. Now, that is what we're trying to raise when we say repeatability or reliability. So you follow the steps as outlined, and somebody else comes and follow the same steps, the results pretty much will be the same. Now, if nothing comes on, you then can go back to steps and check which step did I not do. Because surely you will be under the impression that if I follow all these steps, I should be able to watch the FIFA Club World Cup. This is how it's been outlined. So that's what we're trying to say when we talk about when you say reliability. That is why it's important in your research proposal that you should understand your methods and your methodology, because if I were to follow that 10 years down the line, it will be under different times, in terms of 10 years, but I'm following everything else that you have done, and I should come to the same conclusion. If I don't come to the same conclusion, it doesn't mean that your research was wrong. That is why we then say, let's check what could have been what is the current circumstances or factors that lead us not to come to the same conclusion. So that's why we talk about what we call in research internal validity threats. So basically we are saying, what are the risks that perhaps could influence the result today, so that I don't get to the same conclusion that Lionel reached in the last 10 years. What could it be? So then that's what we say. You then have to understand the validity threats, the internal reliability threats. Why is it then that I don't reach the same conclusion? Similarly, if I want to emphasize the point further, I would say, if somebody says to me, from the OR Tambo Airport to the Union Building, as an example, the destination, the starting point is the OR Tambo, the destination is the Union Building. It takes me 30 minutes from that point of OR Tambo to the Union Building. Now, before you then conclude about the 30 minutes, you need to know about the methods and the methodology. First, you're going to say, what do you use? Now, you use Uber, or do you drive? Do you use a motorbike, whatever? And the second thing you're going to do is you're then going to check which road or which route do you use. Do you fly? Is it a quick private jet, or is it a motorbike, or is it the motor? So those things, the engine capacities, if it's a car, do you walk, do you run, and which route do you use? So once you've eliminated all those, in other words, one what you are talking about from the point A to the point B, we are then able to say, yes, the measurement. So the reliability now becomes the measurement. So from that point to the other point, and where at the Union Building is your stop station, and where in OR Tambo is your starting station. So basically you are eliminating any ambiguities that can arise as a result of elements that may influence internal validity. Then what does internal reliability will mean? In this case, what we mean is, then I know from this point at the OR Tambo to that point at the Union Building, using this road or this route that you shall have identified, but also using this mode of transport, and also this speed that I'm using, in other words, driving at the speed of from this point to that point, assuming that there will be no disturbances on the road, such as the change in the surface of the road, the quality, the driver's fatigue, and so on, everything else being equal, I will be at the Union Building in 30 minutes. Now, do you see how the importance, methodology, and elimination of possible reasons matter in your research? So in other words, you then going to say to me, it takes 30 minutes from point A to point B using this road, driving at this speed, and. So basically that's what we're trying to establish in your. So it's important in research to eliminate all forms of ambiguities, all forms of possible risks that can influence the result. So what do? 10 years down the line, I'd want to test your research as a peer review, and I go to OR Tambo, same spot that you said I should start from. I put in same kind of engine of a motor car, and I get onto the road. Off I go to Union Building. Just before I get into Pretoria, the robots are not working. Everything else is not in good shape. And then I take about 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Do I then say your research was not reliable or valid? No. It could be that there were some risks. In other words, here we say internal validity threats that have influenced the delay of about 15 minutes. What are those? Maybe the quality of the road at the time, the fact that there was stop and go along, the fact that you are driving at an inconsistent speed, the fact that there was load shedding, therefore the robots were not working, and so on it can go. But that does not mean your research that you did 10 years ago was not valid or reliable. It simply means under today's circumstances, maybe that's why there were issues that you are considering. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, to eliminate some of these things. So maybe we will come back to these, reliability and validity. Let's take a detour a little bit so that we come back to it. We'll come back to reliability and validity just now, but hold the thought about reliability, consistency, reproducibility, or repeatability. All those are just big words or small words that simply means when you do something over and over, which is what you should be doing in research, you should then be able to get more or less accurate results like they were received by previous researchers. Now, just so that you remember the process, you would notice that we are actually still stuck at step number 4, which is research design. The reason why we stuck here is that, as I did allude the last time, that when you look at the research design, it's actually the crux of your plan. So we're still talking about how are we going to create a situation where the instrument that you're going to use is reliable. How are you going to make sure that the of your participants is it's structured. What instrument are you going to use to collect data? What instrument are you going to use to analyze data and to interpret data? What is the approach that you are going to follow? In other words, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. What is the population that you are going to draw a sample from? So the totality of the population. And how are you going to draw a sample from the population? So in other words, how are you going to select participants for your study? So we stuck here, ladies and gentlemen. And once all those are cleared, then you take the instrument, you go and collect data. You take the instrument, you analyze data. And you take the instrument, you interpret data. So once we leave step 4, I can tell you everything else is going to be more of a breeze. So please hold the thought on this, because we are stuck on 4, but we are actually moving forward as we move backwards. Last week we spoke about this, and I said once you choose whether you are going to go qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods, the next thing is designs, because each of this approach will have its own design. In other words, if you say it's qualitative, we need to look at what design are you on. If it's quantitative, what design? If it's mixed method, what designs? But what is important here is also on the methods. We said whether you are using qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods, you still have to have questions that you are going to, a set of questions that you're going to put together, which basically you are going to convert into an instrument, the instrument that you are going to use to collect data, the instrument that you are going to use to analyze data and to interpret data. So it doesn't matter which approach you use. Each of these approaches or all of the approaches will have a collection and will have analysis and will have interpretation. Remember, that's all what you do. In research, it's about the systematic process of collecting data, analyzing data, and interpreting data. So basically, you do those 3 things. So this is all what we are trying to do here. We're trying to build the scientific or empirical process of collection of data, analysis of data, and interpretation of data. So that's basically what research does. So whether you are going to collect data on director liabilities, you still have to analyze data on director liabilities, and you still have to interpret data on data liabilities. So basically, that's what we are trying to work around in this process. Now, when you look at the comparison between the quantitative and the qualitative approaches in research, you just have to check them against each other. For example, we say, if you look at quantitative study or quantitative approach, its purpose is to study relationships, cause and effect. So you're looking at what is the relationship between this phenomenon or that phenomenon, or the variables, to be precise. What is the relationship between variable that is dependent and variable that is independent? Is there any relationship? Remember, the relationship can be neutral, can be positive, can be negative, and so forth. Whilst in the qualitative approach, you examine a phenomenon as it is. So basically, you just want to understand things in its rich details. Why is it that the people are the way they are? Or why is it that director liabilities are not being considered? Whatever it is that you are studying as a phenomenon. So that's what qualitative study does. It does not necessarily look at relationships or cause and effect. It examines things in the way that they are. So basically you don't change the way things are. You just want to have a better understanding of them. In terms of the design or the design approach, is that in a quantitative study, you develop the hypothesis prior to the study. So it's deductive. So basically it's like you start by putting an allegation, which test. So you want to test whether or not there is any relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. So you go and test it using the data that you are collecting, analyzing it, and interpreting it. Whilst on the other side of qualitative is that it's more flexible and it evolves during study. So it's inductive. So you may generate theory. So you are not necessarily obsessed about the hypothesis there. You are not testing anything. You may be just generating theory to provide some kind of understanding. So again, that makes the difference between qualitative and quantitative. In terms of the tools, the quantitative uses pre-selected instruments. So, for example, you will then have questionnaires that you predetermine, you test. In research, you say you pilot test them before you distribute them or you administer them to the bigger population that you're focusing your study on. Whilst in the qualitative, researcher is primary data collection tool. So in other words, in a qualitative study, you yourself, you are largely the tool that collect data. So you'll sit one-on-one with a person or a participant or a subject, and you collect that data yourself. And you engage with that data at the same time. And the data takes you in. So you're not necessarily limited in how you collect it. So you are basically asking open questions, and you can start there talking about rugby, and you may end up discussing Iran, Israel, and the US. So that's how it happens in the qualitative study. And in terms of sample, in a quantitative, you use large samples. I mean, you talk about thousands and thousands or hundreds and hundreds. Whilst in a qualitative, you just use small sample. There's nothing wrong to use small sample in a qualitative study, 5 or less, just engaging people who might be knowledgeable on the field and getting information from them rather than using large samples, which large sample obviously means you are going to use it as a quantitative study because quantitative study relies on samples. So for you to come up with large samples, it means you need to look at the size of the population. And in terms of the analysis, the quantitative use statistical analysis of numeric data. 60% of the people love what they see, 40% maybe don't, or 20% are not happy, whilst another 20%. So that is the kind of statistical analysis that the quantitative approach relies on. And again, the qualitative one relies on narrative description and interpretation. This is what people think about me, and that's what they think about me. I mean, if you say, what do you think about, if I ask you, what do you think about the session that we have today? Whatever you think is what you think, and it will come out just like that. But if I start telling you, do you think it's good, bad, or average, or now you've got choices to make, I'm moving into the statistical analysis of the numeric data. Now, it is important, ladies and gentlemen, to understand these approaches. Again, we are repeating them because I know none of your studies will not pick any of these approaches, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. So you need to be clear, what is your approach? Is yours quantitative? Is it qualitative? Or is it mixed methods? So that's very, very important. We'll be back onto the reliability, but let me just see if there is any reflection on your side on the different approaches, because it's important for you to know these approaches and to then relate them to your own study. Your study will either be qualitative or quantitative and or mixed methods. I mean, there's nothing that stops you from choosing an approach and really running with it because you know your study better and you know what you want to achieve with it. But at the same time, my advice is always around you as a researcher. You also need to look at yourself and say where and what is your strength in research. Some people are very numbers, therefore they may want to go quantitative. Some other people are not necessarily strong in numbers. They may go qualitative. Others have got the balance of the two. They may do mixed method. But what you always have to do in consideration and also in consultation with with your promoter, 2, also with the selection of the topic that you are working on. Because it's not just you saying, oh, I'm going to go qualitative. It also has to do with the choice of the subject. In most instances, if little is known of what you are studying, if there's not enough information, you will find that, and that you determine through your literature survey. If you're confronted with that situation, ideally, it is expected of you to do qualitative, because in qualitative, it means also that you're going to generate more knowledge in the field, as opposed to where there is a lot that has been studied on the field. So if you just immediately at the level of literature, you say there is very little information on what I'm studying, and especially in your searches, you're already suggesting that you may then be required to go qualitative, because where little is known, more will be required of you as a researcher. But if the subject has been well studied, there's a lot of information, yes, then you may actually find it easier to go quantitative. But these are just some of the guidelines, not necessarily that this is how you're going to do it all the time. So before we go to talk reliability and stuff, let's talk about qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. What is your level of understanding, comment, reflection, question, complaint, anything on the three approaches? These are the universal approaches in research: mixed methods, quantitative, and qualitative. So you can share with us which approach have you chosen and why, or which approach you are going to choose and why. But for your interest, the study that you may want to, or a proposal that you may want to put together, which approach would you think would be better suited for it and why? In the proposal that you may want to put together, if you haven't done so, which approach would you think you'll go for and why? Or which approaches?
Yeah, it's quite difficult because I'm not in a position where I can appreciate both of them, of these approaches separately.
Okay.
But I would my default position will be on the qualitative approach.
On the qualitative one. Did you say qualitative did you say qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
Okay.
Qualitative, because
right.
I think is more linked to, or more aligned to, a bulk of desktop work, rather than collecting bulk samples in order to come that is reliable. I'm not sure whether I got it correctly.
So you may want to do, you would require smaller samples.
Yes, I think I would require a smaller sample, and then
do you have
those
it
samples
in mind? Do you already have that study in mind, or is we just working on an abstract, hypothetical situation?
Previously, I did say that looking at studying, or looking at the application, if I use that word, of the magistrates courts in order to deal with some certain labor matters.
Okay.
Now, yes, the way I want to do it is firstly look at the functioning of the CCMA and other related bodies to the CCMA, those bodies which are around the CCMA, and then thereafter look at the functioning of the labor court, okay, and then the labor, and then look at how then one can fit the functioning, the magistrates court, especially the regional courts, in terms of assisting in that regard, to open another as an option to say, if you want your matter to be resolved at CCMA, go CCMA, but labor court, sorry, the magistrates court are also available to assist, and which their outcome, I'm not sure, because they end up, maybe they'll end up appealing in the same body, which is Labour Court, but Magistrates Court can be outcome can be appealable at any other high court.
So,
I'm just
so
looking
in terms
at that.
of
I'm
your,
not sure. Yes.
yeah, no, I think I'm following you. I remember the conversation, but let me find out from you. What is the status of a proposal? At what stage are you?
Still in the beginning.
Or you don't have a as yet, so you don't have something that you say, okay, here is a proposal and this is where I am at the moment. So you hypothetically you would go qualitative, you say.
Yes, yeah. I'm in a stage of formulating that proposal. I'm together with my supervisor, but I haven't yet submitted it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It makes sense because, but I think what I'm hearing you saying is, even at this early stages of a preparation, you're more tempted to go qualitative because you don't see yourself going big, large samples or something like that. You don't see yourself forming a hypothesis. You just see yourself really focusing on a particular area of work where you may want one or two people and reports and some information to work around so that you can make some conclusions around it, which is more within the field of qualitative still. So the collection of data might be limited to a very small sample. That's what I'm hearing you saying. But obviously over time, that might, you are welcome to change your mind if something pops up. Am I hearing you right?
Yes. Because as I said last time, I do have, I already have my suspicions of what is likely, what is wrong, what is how it needs to be fixed. But I just need now information that can corroborate that.
Okay. Let's listen to a little bit. Let's give Takalani a chance. Thanks, Max. Takalani, having listened to this conversation and also the discussion on qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods as research approaches, which approach or approaches do you think they are suitable to what you're trying to do, and why?
I think my research will follow the qualitative approach. Reason being, I don't think I have much of numbers, graphs, or any figures to test, but rather the concepts. I like I said, my research is what's the word? It's a comparative analysis. So that on its own, I think, is just a comparison between concepts instead of numbers instead. There's no statistics that I think I will need.
So why then you say you're gonna choose qualitative because what is the just give me the reason again. Why are you going qualitative?
Because it's more of comparison between the two jurisdictions and not much of statistics involved or numbers, I don't see where my research will require me to say so many people have been satisfied with 1, 2, or 3.
So yes. let me just check, because I mean there's nothing wrong in saying that. Now, are you comparing situations that are similar or unsimilar? No, not similar, dissimilar. Because you can.
Remember, Prophet, my topic, I'm more identifying differences and similarities, and then take what each jurisdiction can copy from the other, in order to reform their law.
Oh, so there will be no need to interview thousands and thousands of people. You can talk to 2 people and that's it.
Exactly. I
Okay.
won't need to interview much people if ever I will need to.
So from what you are able to deduce now, just at this level, because we are also just talking hypothetically, is that you would not need large samples. A small sample of 3 or 4 people or participants will do. Is it if you read, have you done? Well, look, please pardon me. You may have said this before. Have you looked into literature review already, or you still at an early stages of the proposal?
I'm still at an early stage because I still don't have a supervisor as yet. So I don't want to go far astray, only to find that there's a lot that I really just need to redo. So a bit
Okay.
of guidance when having a supervisor will really be of to really progressing. I think I'd be far if I had a supervisor. So at this point, I'm still a bit in the dark, even with some of the concepts that we're doing here. It's still a bit dark for me.
Oh
Because
no.
I don't
Are
have
we not
much.
are we not that helpful to you, Tagalan? Like you don't want to go far in the dark. Like are we taking you far into darkness now?
At this point, I can say I'm merely grabbing the concepts,
Yeah.
hopefully to be able to apply them as soon as I get a supervisor.
Oh my word. Yeah, well, if this was not making it possible for you to put together a wonderful proposal so that by the time you get a supervisor, all you do is to submit, then you are putting my work at risk now.
No, Prof, not at all. I think, in fact, the supervisor will be really impressed with what I will do, like from what I've been getting
Okay.
from
Yeah,
these
that
classes,
sounds
honestly.
that sounds better. That sounds better because I think if the supervisor is going to tell you that
I, as
reliability
soon as
has
I get a
nothing to do.
supervisor, as soon as I get a supervisor, I promise you very positive.
Thank you. Thank you. Because I was thinking if the supervisor is going to find it a bit concerning that you already know what reliability is, and now we speak about reproducibility of results. Now it's like, no, wait, this is not what I'm looking for. No, I'm just kidding. But Godfrey will talk to that again, maybe with a issue. If we can just pack it for now, we'll come back to it. Now, let me see. Thanks,
Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, Tagalani, for sharing. Let me come back and we go reliability because that's what I think we're going to spend some time on. Is there anyone on this platform who has already, other than Koketso, I know she did speak about a proposal, who has already submitted a proposal for which perhaps they've already chosen the methodology and the approach, and they want to share that with us? Or all of you are still at the early stages of development? Koketso, I'm going to reserve you for last. Let me hear if there's anybody who has done the proposal right now. And in the proposal, they've identified the approach, whether qualitative, quantitative, and or mixed methods for which maybe they want to share briefly. Anyone? Please go ahead if you have gone through that process. You now said, this is my approach, not this is the approach that I'm thinking about. And these are my reasons why I have selected this approach, and so on and so on. Is there no one? Okay, so let me allow you to share with us here if you are able to hear us.
Yes, Prof. So I have because this is a proposal, right? I've proposed using qualitative.
Qualitative.
Yes. Qualitative, so that I don't have to use a mass amount of data. And the reason is because I think that my topic is pretty focused. It is focused on a specific number of or a specific type of people. And when I say type, I mean as in, are they here legally? Have they been receiving social assistance from government and so on? So it's not a broad spectrum research. So I use this, and it's also very observational as well. And that is why I decided to go the qualitative route. When I was going through some of the documents that have been written previously, there's actually surprisingly quite a lot written already on the matter. If one looks at the human rights NPOs that have submitted proposals to government or human rights, so there's actually quite a lot of writing that has been going on over time. So I did not think that I needed to go quantitative, but also because I'm really not a numbers person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Look, it would appear to me, again, I'm taking a quantitative risk here, that the majority of you, even those that are still working on the proposals, are more inclined to go qualitative. So it looks like, Koketso, you are in good company with the majority of the students at this platform. What is the challenge, or what is the, and again, you can get me right there if I'm wrong. What is the issue on the quantitative as it relates to some of your studies? Is it because all of you are quite comfortable with qualitative studies, and also that you really like large samples and questionnaires and all those kind of things? What is the most likely reason for the good choice of qualitative by many of us here? Okay, you can go ahead. I mean, you did say, Koketso, that you are not a numbers person, but also that you've got a very particular group of people that you want to focus on, that you don't want to go beyond bigger numbers of population, but then you will use the small sample to collect as much data as possible from what the population that you're going to work with. Is there anything? Yeah,
yes,
please go ahead.
What I also thought, Prof, was that people who regard themselves as, or who are undocumented people, regard themselves as illegal. So getting information out of them poses for them an exposure risk. Even if you say to them, listen, this is going to be this is not, your name is not going to be disclosed, and so on and so forth. But they just thinking, what
actually your study, without really, sorry for interjecting.
No problem.
That quality and that type of population works better with a qualitative approach than a quantitative. I mean, if you are going to give a questionnaire, remember, with the qualitative, you are involved in the data collection physically. So basically, it's like you are there to guide and everything else.
Yes.
Now, with the quantitative, you give us a questionnaire. You're not involved directly, which is the reason why it works better to have a qualitative for that type of population. And I think for that reason, there's good reason why you can do qualitative than quantitative. Because if you give a questionnaire to those people who see them as both illegal, and so they may actually feel, oh, maybe this is just a trap, because they don't see the researcher and your involvement is minimal. So it does make sense for you to go qualitative. And I think the type of sampling that you're going to use, most possibly, when we do sampling, I think we'll look at that. If we don't, please just bring us back into it. You're probably going to use what you call snowball technique. In other words, I know Koketso, Koketso knows Samora, Samora knows Takalani, kind of, So you're going to say, if somebody trusts you enough, they'll then be able to say, well, I know two guys, do you know two people who might be interested in this? If they've trusted you to give you the information, they may then give you two more people. So basically, it's like you go there by recommendation, which is another technique. So I think I see that as, for you, for your study, there's more likelihood that qualitative would be the appropriate approach to your study for that reason. Anything, Koketso, on that? Sorry, I interjected you, and I apologize.
No, not at all, Prof. You were right on point, but I did say, what I needed to say.
Okay, so please just note that, because it might be that your study is qualitative in nature, and as I said, you've got your reasons, but amongst others, then we're going to have to see how we connect the whole qualitative all the way, because the way in which you're going to collect data must be qualitative, the way in which you're going to analyze data must be qualitative, the way in which you're going to select your population must be qualitative, and the sampling that you are going to adopt, the strategy that you are going to adopt must be qualitative. So basically, I see that as a golden thread. So you may not have, with qualitative, remember, there's no need to have a hypothesis per se, because you just want to get the experiences, the insight of the population that you are working with. But like I said, it's a continuous conversation that we'll have on qualitative as opposed to quantitative. But you also have to note the quantitative, which I think in part of your chapter on research design, you have to expose your understanding of quantitative and qualitative, and why you're going qualitative as well, because that's how you justify the work that you do. That I know about quantitative, I know about qualitative, I've looked at the quantitative, applies under certain circumstances, but for this purpose, I'm going for qualitative, and these are my reasons. That's very, very important in research.
Yes.
So there's nobody in this platform who feels that they're going to go questionnaire, send to people apps, and then people will say, yes, I agree, I disagree, or I know or I don't know, yes or no, closed questions. Is that what we are going through right now? Nobody is inclined to go quantitative. Okay, Lionel, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'm going to go the quantitative route as an additional assessment, because there's also, apart from the looking at this director's liability, is also get a view. Remember I said last week, we've got the whole country watching Parliament, engaging with state-owned enterprises and the management of it. And also, I've got like almost 8,000 followers on LinkedIn. So I was thinking, because most of the people that I connect with are professionals, other lawyers, mostly lawyers and so forth. You understand? And many of those people are also, I know they've got their own businesses. The reason why I know that, because when we do admissions of legal practitioners, they're not allowed to be part of a company, but as soon as they get admitted, they actually register a company, and because they want to do additional business, because often they struggle to practice as per se. And it's also to get a view on that, and that I think is just an additional information to also have a perception of how the general public feels, even if I just go into a specific target a specific group of people, because I know more or less what their background is. And that also the type of questions that I intend asking is a person a director, and then also see if they're professionals, because often you find that professionals own companies. Not always the case, but it could be anybody. And then obviously outside that scope, just have additional scope for other people and see what it is. Because the thing is, if you have a view in terms of the research that you do, because you can do research and you can do an analysis and you can come to a conclusion, but also that is your conclusion, but also it will be good maybe just to do a sampling of perception, because that could be an outside just to do a little section on, to say this is what I found in my research, but this in line with perception or not, you understand? So I can just test it against another theory, but not on that big scale, although I want to do it for quantitative, because if I can do, say, sampling of 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people, that'll be a good sampling.
No, that will be massive.
Yeah. So
I would even say maybe 30% of that will be good enough. But let me check something, because you also have to be realistic on how far and how big you want to go. For me, a 30% of that will be good sample. Anything from 250 and above is acceptable. But let me ask you. I just want to say
this. Add quickly. So the sampling, I won't keep it open for a long period, because I most probably will do it for 2 to 4 weeks, because because people actually do participate. I've seen many people do samplings, like on LinkedIn, for instance. I don't want to go and do Facebook sampling or something like that. I don't think that is a platform for that, because
next week we'll be talking population and sampling. But before we get there, let's just talk. Let's just talk a little bit. So, who is your population? Who are you?
Mine is mostly legal practitioners, so they are professionals.
So legal practitioners from where?
From in the South African sphere, not outside South Africa, within the South African.
But are they in a particular sector, or just are they in a particular sector, or it's just random?
They're in the legal sector, so they could be either be an attorney or an advocate, or some of them are prosecutors. So they all, but I would say 95% is legal practice, is in the legal fraternity. And so because remember, many of those people deal with the same type of problem with director's liability. So that's why I want to do that type of sampling. So you can see, I'm trying to narrow it.
What I'm trying to direct you at is that you need to have a sector, so that you then say they are coming from this sector, and it's like having a port. It's like saying sector, they are going to come. Yeah, you're going to come. Sorry, Lionel. Sorry, I think we are talking past each other. Let me listen to you.
Okay.
I was saying maybe you need to create a port from where, because you see, a population, it's important to be fixed. In other words, you need to say legal practitioners from X or Y or Z, right? You sample from there, because otherwise then your sampling is going to be quite chaotic if we don't know where you're sampling from. Because you see, when you sample from a population, you then say this is the totality of the population. It's like now, if I were to work with students, I may say students at the University of South Africa, but maybe Johannesburg based. You understand? So that becomes my fishing pond. So in other words, that becomes the pot within which I will sample from. But if I just say students of the University of South Africa, it may then mean, I've got all the sites of UNISA here at home and overseas. And maybe that's not what I mean. You understand? So when you look at the population, we'll talk about it when we talk about external validity. In other words, when you talk about the population, one of the errors that students can also make is not to have a population which is well defined for you to draw as a population. I mean, a sample. Does it make sense? Am I making?
Yeah, yes,
am I making
it's
sense?
correct. But that being said, remember I said I'm going to a specific platform. I'm targeting specific people. You understand? So I know it might sound that I'm not narrowing it very much, but
is the site that you're talking about the LinkedIn?
Yes, that's the site. So I confine it to that, not to Facebook or whatever. You understand? And then
so your population of legal practitioners at whatever level is LinkedIn platform, right?
That's correct.
Now, the LinkedIn platform that you are using to determine the population of the legal practitioners, you'll be only focusing on those that have got anything to do with directors' liabilities, right?
Well,
because you may not remember your interest is directors' liabilities. It's not any other legal issues. It's more to do with directors' liabilities.
That's correct. That's what the questions will relate to as well. Because
yes. So if I've got nothing.
Okay. Sorry if I may. So the whole idea is, say I know you say let's work on 250. But my idea is...
No, I'm saying 250.
No, I'm going to give you an example now.
It's an acceptable ratio. You can work with 20,000, anything. I mean, I'm just saying there's a number that you use. It's as a ratio that is acceptable for sampling purposes.
Yeah, but I want to do the sampling in a specific way. And maybe you can pitch in on that. So, for instance, I'm giving a hypothesis here now. So, for instance, I sample 1,000 people, I get 1,000 people respond. But out of that 1,000, I get 300 or 250 that are actually directors of companies. Then I can rely on that because I want to extrapolate those people that are actually directors, because I also want to get, I'm more interested in what their view is as a director in terms of director's liability. Because you'll find other people answering, so I don't, and I can just use it as an overarching view perhaps, but that is not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in people that are actually directors in a legal fraternity. Then I extrapolate. Then I can sorry if I may. So remember, the qualitative aspect then comes out of the quantitative.
No. What you are saying is, remember, like I said, when we discuss population and sampling, please remember this conversation. We'll get back to it, but we can have a discussion again. What I'm saying is, even when you are going to a population, even if we go to a school, let's use maybe a different example. You want to study something related to children in schools. You're going to say, I'm looking for children between the ages of 12 and 9. Let's say that's your scope, and that's your requirement. So for you to be eligible, you must be either 9 or 12. Right? So the minute you walk into the school and you get children, not all those children are going to fit your population profile. You agree?
Yes.
So even at you need to have, because there's probability and there's non-probability sampling strategy. What you are saying is, when you walk into LinkedIn, you look at any practitioner who's got anything to do with director's liability. That already exclude anyone who's got nothing to do with director's liability of your 1,000. Do you agree with that?
That's correct.
So in other words, you are not going to be wasting time talking to legal practitioners who have got nothing to do with the director's liabilities, because that's not how you want to sample. Your population, then now you're already moving into non-probability. You say, please come. You are 1,000. Do you have anything to do with so that's your requirement. So my eligibility is based on whether or not I have anything to do with director's liability, because the gist of your research, the essence of what you are researching is director's liability. So for me, that's what we are talking about right now. However, you then said, if you are able to get 1,000 of those, in other words, if there's thousands of legal practitioners within your profile that have got everything and anything to do with director's liabilities, you will then sample that. Now I'm saying, yes, for a quantitative study, you can have all 1,000 of them, but there's nothing wrong in also, because there's another principle that is return error rate. Not
Yes.
all 1,000 people will return the questionnaire or whatever else that you are doing. So you need to also build that into the 1,000, that, okay, even if I don't have everybody responding, like maybe not 50%, if I get 15, 10 or 20 or 30%, I am okay. Because the 10 or the 15 or the 30% could be a representative of the 1,000 that you sample. So you can sample more, but you get less in terms of answers. So when we discuss those areas, I think maybe it will be more clear. But I hear you from what you are saying. You want to balance the two, because all what you are saying is, I want to have a large statistical ability to analyze the numbers, which is your quantitative, but also maybe one or two directors that you can just balance the discussion with. So it's your working mixed methods. Am I right?
That's correct.
Because this is more mixed method. You're building the numbers on the one side, building a list of questions, which are closed questions, but you can also add open questions from there, where you say, what do you think about this? Now you can also collect quantitative. You can use the instrument that is quantitative to also collect qualitative data. So what they think could also form part of the qualitative, and you can have one or two more questions with one or two people just to corroborate the quantitative data that you shall have collected. So that can be done, because that's mixed methods.
Yes.
It does give your study strength as well, because if you can use both approaches, then it gives you a lot more. Like I said, it gives your study. If you use mixed methods, your study is much more solid as well. That if you just use one approach. But obviously, at the next level, that may then take you to. That's a PhD stuff as well. Congratulations if you do it. But just work. Let's just spend time talking about that population, because from the population, that's where you're going to draw your sample. So if the population is not well defined, it's going to make a mess of your sampling.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so hold the thought. I think it's a fantastic idea that we will pursue through this engagement.
Yes, and I also believe by doing that, getting the qualitative out of the quantitative, it also will give more credibility, because then the sampling is not just something that you grasp from the air. There's actually, although it's through a questionnaire that was done through interaction, but it was a defined interaction, if I can call it that, because I know exactly who I'm targeting, and like we said, if I get 1,000 people that respond, then 250 are actually directors. Then I can discard the rest, because that is got no value, because I'm looking for those that are actually directors. And like we said, because I just want to formulate, I've got an idea of the type of questions I want to formulate, because that's another thing that's important to me, is not formulating any nonsensical question, because then it doesn't help the study at all, because it must relate to the director's liability and ancillary aspects that I want to establish with the director's liability.
Fair enough, but remember,
Yes.
Remember also how you develop questionnaires.
Yes.
You develop questionnaires based on the literature review. So in other words,
That's correct.
Your questions are going to be drafted largely from what is already known through your literature review, so that the measure, because when you measure a question, it must relate to the essence of your study. So in other words, you are not going to ask me how I feel today, because the feeling that I have for today for you might not be answering anything to do with the variables. So
Yes.
you're going to ask me questions relating to directors' liabilities in that context. Remember, that's essentially what you're going to. So that's why in a questionnaire, in a quantitative study, it feels like you've got one question asked in different ways. The reason being is being measured differently. But when we do questionnaire development, that will also maybe be part of the discussion we'll have as to how to design a questionnaire, because you need to know why is this question, what is this question answering, and how am I going to measure it? For example, if I were to ask you 2 questions today, what do you think today's session was good or bad? Then you know I'm actually trying to determine what are the areas of improvement. If there's a lot of bad, then the question is going to be, how do I make bad good? If there's a lot of good, how do I then sustain and make it even more better? So those measurements are important in research. So that's the reason why we have these conversations, because it's really to empower all the researchers to do research in a much more powerful way. So yeah, you're right. So the basis of your questionnaires is going to be, you can ask one question, but maybe in different ways and getting different results, because at the end of the day, you are measuring the director's liabilities as we go along. But then what you do is that you take the same understanding and you sit with maybe 1 or 2 experts, who understand directors' liabilities. And instead, you are not going to give them a questionnaire. You can have a sit down with them and say, what do you think about it? With them, you will ask them open questions. What are you doing? You are corroborating the quantitative data with the qualitative data. And what do you call that process? We'll talk about it, is triangulation. Basically, you are triangulating data to create a much more authentic research, that you did not only get it from one source, there was multiplicity of sources. That's also that's another great way of doing it. So you use quantitative data, qualitative data, one interview here, and then supported by literature. So what have you done? You have actually triangulated your data.
Yeah. That's why I said that is where the credibility then for me will come in, because as you said, you've approached it from various angles, and then that will also create your reliability and validity, like a slide you've got on the screen, because then that it's solid information. Another question I have for you, if you don't mind, is in your view, is there specifics on how many research questions you ask in something like this when you do the quantitative questionnaire?
No, there is not a number. There's a guidelines, but obviously what you do, you identify areas that you want to develop questionnaires on. Let's say you've got 5 areas.
Yes.
So perhaps you'd say 3 questions per area,
Yes.
Whatever the case might be. So that then gives you 3 questions by 5 areas. That then is 5 by 3, So these are the number of questions. But remember, the biographical data will be automatic, like,
Yes.
male, female, or if you wanted to know the ages, because sometimes issues are also biographical that you want to know. Are you a woman? Are you a man? Or you don't want, are you this age grouping from this age to that? That kind of information is almost, standard across but it's important also to measure that, because part of what you are doing is you then know, is it more women directors that are supportive of the idea, or men? Is it more the younger ones that are more supportive, or the older ones? So all that information for the analysis is going to be quite crucial. So then you go into the depth or the deeper percentages as per your areas. For example, the first question, maybe we've got 5 questions that are asking the same thing but differently, and then there's a measure for it. Because remember, with quantitative, you are going to use that statistical where you then tell us there is this support on this 60% versus 40%. That then means the majority support the idea, if that support is what you were asking for. Yeah. But at the same time, what that does is then to say you are going to make such conclusions on the strength of that statistical analysis. However, you may also juxtapose that with what is being said by experts when you do qualitative. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an agreement all the way. It could be an agreement quantitatively, disagreement qualitatively. So that's just how you're going to play around with the data. But that shouldn't be too difficult, because you would be assisted by statisticians as well in the university.
But then that brings us back to the discussion we had in the beginning of today's lecture or discussion, what I wanted to say is, sorry, I forgot completely, but it comes to the the time frame. So, for instance, what somebody else has researched maybe 5 years ago, and then you might come to a different conclusion because now you would have tested against previous research or conclusions in terms of a similar analysis. I mean, we remember a couple of weeks back, we looked at directors' liability when we did a search. You showed everybody how to search. And then obviously there's much about director's liability in any event, but then actually that can be tested against that research again.
Yes, we'll talk about those factors that can influence the outcome of a research that is done many years later, because but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just to say be mindful of such.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the engagement. Now, let's complete our engagement on reliability, ladies and gentlemen, because I thought when we started, that is what we were talking about, and we promised Samora that we have done the pre-testing, and we hope that post-test will be good. Now, if you look at these 2 principles in research, validity and reliability, we say this is the ways to communicate the rigor of your research processes and the trustworthiness of your research findings. So if we talk about validity and reliability, we're looking at the rigor of your research process. How rigorous was it, and how trustworthy are your findings? Now, reliability is about how far a particular test, as in, remember we spoke about the hypothesis and so on, the procedure or the tool being the questionnaire that we just spoke about now with Lionel. Such as a questionnaire will produce similar results in different circumstances, assuming nothing else has changed. So if things remain the same, but circumstances are different, when I follow your procedure using your tools, I need to get same results. However, validity is about the closeness of what is being measured. So he is not measuring everything else. He's measuring director's liability. What is important is when you say validity, we mean what are you measuring? He's measuring director's liability. But then the test and the procedure and the tool and the questionnaires, everything else is being used for that test. So the repeatability of the questions and everything else is about the director's liability. Now, reliability, therefore, if I were to ask a question, did you attend religious service last week? You can either say yes or no. This type of question, for example, would have a higher reliability than if I were to ask you the question about how many times have you attended religious service in your life. If I ask you, how many times have you attended religious activities in your life? You will get more of an unreliable answers than when I ask you, did you attend religious services last week? Because here you can either say yes or no. So if I've got 1,000 people that have asked this question, I'm more able to measure how many people attended service last week, of the 1,000. So I'm able to say 800 people attended service last week, 200 people did not attend service last week. How do I know that? Because the answer to that question will tell me. So it's important on how you frame your question as well. But if I say about how many times have you attended religious service in your life? Now, our lives are different. Some people may just have started attending religious service now. Other people may have grown up attending religious service when they were young, and so the reliability of that question is not very high. But the first one, I can get more of a higher reliability. So generally, reliability refers to the consistency of a measurement, whether repeated measurement of the same phenomenon would provide consistent, stable results. Remember the example I was giving also about moving from OR Tambo to Pretoria at the Union Building. So you are able to get, the same measurement or the same consistent results if you have defined the A and the B, rather than if it's more open and broad. So it's the accuracy or the repeatability of an instrument. I take that instrument that Lionel is using, I apply it myself, I should get the same results. So this is about whether the results of a study are responsible for the finding that I'm presenting before you. So in other words, I'm able to say there is a negative, there is a neutral, there is a positive relationship between variable A and variable B, which is an independent or dependent variable. For example, last week we spoke, if you go out and you're going to measure, you want to explore depression, or you want to explore director's liabilities. But then you measure anxiety. So in other words, you miss the target insofar as director's liabilities is concerned. That doesn't make your research wrong. It simply means you miss the validity element, but you can still achieve the reliability element. So here we are not looking at a situation where you are right on validity and you are right on reliability. It's just to understand that there's measures of reliability and validity. And you yourself as a researcher, you could also critique yourself on that point when you do your reporting, that the level of validity on my study is not very high. Why? Because then you would realize that in your questions and the answers that you're getting, perhaps you to hit the target. So validity describes a measure that accurately reflects the concept as it is intended to measure. So you may then have developed questions that are more anxiety related rather than depression related. So although they were properly answered, the instrument was consistent and everything else was done, the sampling was perfect, it could just as well be that the validity was missed at that level. So that's just the way you should understand the validity and reliability. Now, what is very, very key on validity, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call internal validity. Validity has to do with whether the results of the study, one, are legitimate. Now, when we say legitimate, we mean that the way you selected the participants, the way you recorded or collected data and analyzed the data. So the extent to which it's designed and the data it yields allow you as a researcher to draw accurate conclusions about the cause and effect or other relationship within the data. So in other words, you read the data and you have to make sense out of it. That is there any relationship between the data as you have it? In other words, are you able to relate the director's liability to what you wanted it to relate to. That is what internal validity is about. The degree to which changes in the dependent variable are due to the independent variable rather than something else. So again, I normally use this example of a court of law, where they then say we have now established beyond reasonable doubt that the independent variable is responsible to what we see. In other words, the degree of changes that we see in the dependent variable. So the dependent variable did not just change because, you know, it was just a good thing to do. It changed because the independent variable made it change. So this is the reason where you say we are now sure that the change that we see in Y as measured are attributable to the X. So fire causes smoke. So you are able to tell us that insofar as directors' liabilities are concerned, you are able to give us that as the reason for whatever relationship that you are trying to establish, or the cause and effect, or whatever else that you are building on the dependent variable. However, back to the point that we are talking about, to threats to internal validity. So in other words, what can influence the results of your findings other than just looking at the internal validity? In other words, what can be the other causes other than what we are talking about in this context? Now, these are like risks that we can now talk to on the area of internal validity. So in other words, there are issues that can threaten the study, one of which is history, maturation, testing, instrumentation, and forth. What does that mean? If somebody was interviewed in 1994, you know, as the first occurrence, and I know someone in 2024, there's a history in between. Now, history can also threaten validity, when we can ascertain that an event other than the independent variable may be associated with the dependent variable. Somebody that I interviewed in 1994 might have a different views of what it was to talk about democracy then than it is today. So history on its own can threaten. So in other words, somebody can say, I have a different conclusions. And not that there's anything wrong with the conclusions that Lionel had at the time. It could mean that because of history, things have changed, and therefore, you know, things are viewed differently. Instrumentation. When you talk about instrumentation, we talk about the instrument that you use to collect data, how those instruments are used. The procedure for administering instrument changes over time. If a person is collecting data, you may start from different things over time. So for example, I'm sure you see when people are doing census in Stats SA. So those are the administering instruments. So in other words, they go house to house, collecting data and so forth. So this difference can cause a selection bias. Selection bias means that something in the makeup of the subject favors one group or another group. For example, if you have got a group of people, you generally like those that agree with you as opposed to those that differ with you. That is selection bias. You tend to give the instrument to those that are willing to answer than those that are difficult. Selection of subject. When we select participants or subjects of our research, right? Because of the fact that the differences in their makeup, these differences can cause a selection bias. So you look at in the population, you said you've got 1,000. You may then decide, you know what, I actually don't like this group or that group, and that may also become something that can influence my selection. So although Lionel used a different selection criteria, when I come in, I factor in certain biasness that may influence my results. Experimental mortality. You start with a number of people. We all know that you can also lose subject. So these laws of subjects can limit the generalizability of research. You start with 300 people, along the way 10 people, drop out or they leave the study. Because remember, research is voluntary. So again, that can influence the results. You worked with 1,000 on your LinkedIn account, and then all of a sudden, 200 are no longer participating. That's mortality. They don't necessarily die, they just drop out. It can also influence, it may influence your outcome. Location, this one also, it's a threat that you should be mindful of. It means that something about the setting of the study. We know that there are those, earlier on we talked to Pule, he was at work. Now just imagine if you bombard Pule with questions while he's at work. Maybe it's uncomfortable to answer certain questions because there might be questions that can be intrusive in nature where you want to know certain things that he may be uncomfortable to say in a different location. That can also influence your study. Maturation. When change occurs naturally and ineffectively over a period of time, the people grow up. If you spoke to somebody who was doing entry level at the university, and you speak to that person today doing masters or PhD, over time, they may actually have a different perspective of life because they are matured, they've matured, or they've been exposed to things that they were not exposed to before. That can also influence the way in which the outcome come about, because then they've got a different level of understanding of how things are and so on. So basically, when we talk about internal validity, ladies and gentlemen, we're not saying these are the reasons, but we say be mindful of the fact that when you come to a different conclusion today as it was by somebody else many years ago, it could be because of some of those elements that you are talking about: the history, the selection of subject, the maturity, the experimental mortality, location, and so on. On the other hand, we talk about external validity. Internal, remember, it has to do with the fact that you are saying you've got no doubt that there is a relationship between the variables, or this variable causes the other variable. So it's what I was saying earlier is you've got no doubt that no reasonable doubt that you are guilty as charged. That's internal validity. And external validity is to do with generalizability. So it involves whether the results given by the study are transferable to other populations. So generalizability of findings from a study. If I take 1,000 from what Lionel was saying, I take 1,000 from his population and I get 250. I formulated the question so well using the right instrument. I got the replies. I am more likely to generalize those results to the entire population because I may have a sample that is representative of this population. So that's what external validity is about. It is the extent to which conclusions can be applied across different populations or situations. So when we discuss validity without internal validity, we cannot have external validity. So when we discuss validity, internal validity, we also have to consider external validity. Internal as in the cause or the relationship, external as in the extent to which we can generalize the results. Now, there are also threats to external validity. In other words, there's a threat to the population. One is the laboratory setting. If you use a lab set, and when it's a lab, we don't a natural natural science lab. It's just the environment within which you find people in their natural setting. As a poor analog to the real world, if people are in a different environment, it may not necessarily, it's almost like working with prisoners. Prisoners live in an artificial environment. It's almost like a lab setting. So the behavior that they will exhibit in an artificial environment is more likely to be different. It's analog to the real world. So it's not the same. The subject mortality, we spoke about it, that when you've got a population that you have selected randomly and you start losing some members of that population, that also influences the totality of the population. Selection bias, talked about that. And there's ways within which you can improve on this. The Hawthorne effect or the testing effect, when people know that they are under camera, they're being looked at, like a big brother, they behave in a different way than when they are not being observed. So participants recognize they are being tested, may give responses that you are looking for as a researcher. So if we are participants and we know that we have been tested, we may actually behave in a particular way just to satisfy you as a researcher. So how do we improve validity? If you want to improve validity, one, you can increase the heterogeneity of the study population. So you can look at a population from a multiple elements, women, men, age, cohort, and so on, race, and all those elements. You can pull all of them together so that you've got a heterogeneous population. Because it's important to know if a sample is representative, then you should be able to generalize the results. So you can look at the population from all the elements of that you are looking for, so that you're then able to generalize. I mean, if I look at you now, I may then have to say, how many are you? How many of you are male? How many of you are female? And. So I can start staggering all those elements to make sure that I have the right representativity in the sample. How do you then improve external validity? You do a real life setting. So basically you use an environment that is more representative of a real life circumstances, so that people are being, you conduct your research in the outside world, where people are really at a much more comfortable level. Representative sample, again, this is going to be a song that you're going to sing, because if you've got a representative sample, you can generalize your results. So here it means, as researchers, you want participants in a research study to be representative of a sample of a population about which you want to draw conclusions. If you want to draw conclusion about directors' liabilities in a particular sector, you select a representative sample. Replication in different contexts. Imagine that researchers that come after you, undertake the same research, they need to come to the same conclusion, which is the reason why this principle must be rigor as well. Again, if you want to generalize findings, this is very, very important to the whole population. You need a representative sample. So if you say Nigerians are bad, they are drug dealers, you may want to sample a representative sample of them. Not the entire Nigeria, because there's 300 million people, but in the area or in the space that you are studying. If you say, whatever stereotypes or prejudices that you have, the principle is you generalize to the population if your sample is representative enough. We spoke about triangulation. Just to conclude this conversation, this is multiple way of sources of data that you use in order to support your findings or your sources and so on. It is common in qualitative research, because you as a researcher, you might engage in many informal observations in the field. You conduct in-depth interviews. Then you look for common themes that appear in the data. So basically, you've got different sources of information that you bring together, and you create that multiple different sources. So common in mixed methods, Lionel, that you speak about, in which both quantitative and qualitative data are collected to address a single question. So what it means is really that, and you can say it in your writing, that I did triangulate my data. How? I collected data quantitatively and I collected data qualitatively, and I compared this data with the interviews and or the theories. That's what you can say in your research. How did you triangulate? It's a very, very good principle in research, and you can also write about it in your own research information. Ladies and gentlemen, this then today concludes our work on reliability and validity, and to some extent the triangulation. I just thought let's conclude this properly so that at least all of you are able to relate your own studies on reliability, which is the consistency, repeatability, reproducibility of your study. Reliability means you are doing this and you're doing consistently, and validity is when you look at internal. I said, if you like to use the legal jargon, you can say beyond reasonable doubt. There's a relationship between this variable and that variable. But you are not just going to say there's a relationship. You need to quantify that relationship. Is it a positive relationship? Is it a negative relationship? Or it is a neutral relationship? Because in research, you are trying to establish a relationship between and amongst variables, or causal relationship. You can tell us this causes that for sure, so you are sure about that. And then if you do a representative of a population, you are able then to say this therefore means it's applicable to the entire population, because you sample the population in a representative way. When we come to sampling designs, I think that is going to be much more clearer. But I hope for the sake of Samora today, we are able to say pre-test, he said, I'm on 0. We can check when we do post-test after the intervention where he is. He might still be at the same level, and that would then mean the intervention didn't work. In summary, Samora, where can we locate you from when we started? You are a subject of our discussion today.
Trying to understand the question.
I'm saying, where are you? I mean, when we started and we were talking reliability, you said you've got no idea. And now where in the scale are you from no idea?
Now I have an idea what reliability is, but obviously reliability, I assume, is also dependent on objectivity and how narrow the question is. Because if your question is based on is subjective and widely based, then your reliability doesn't necessarily mean that the result is not reliable. Because if a subjective question that you put into place, you might ask me the same question in 2 different occasions, my answer will be, if it's based on subjective facts or my subjective analysis or my subjective answer, I will give you 2 different answers. That doesn't mean necessarily that the answer that you're getting is not reliable.
Okay, so in relation to the research principle, does it make sense to you that the reliability is to do with the repeatability of the process, that you'll get to the same results when you repeat the same process? It
makes sense, but based on, as I say, based on how repeatability and how narrow the question is. As you stated now previously, if the question is, let's say, the answer is based on a yes and no result, that answer will be more reliable than it is an open question which might solicit variable answers. So
yeah. Well, sorry.
No, I'm fine. You can continue.
If you and I do the same thing over and over, the same degree, driving from point A to point B, same speed, same everything, would you not expect us to arrive at the same time in the destination that we are going to?
Yes, I agree with that, because that is based on objective facts. But
that is reliability.
And I agree with that. But I'm saying
we then say, however, there could be circumstances that we start at the same time, but we don't end at the same time, because it could mean various internal validity threats. There could be reasons why we don't arrive at the same time. And it could mean maybe along the way you got a puncture, or I got a puncture. I did not drive at the same speed, or I had a condition that necessitated me to slow down and it doesn't mean that we're not going to the same destination. It could mean that there were factors that were not eliminated before, we can make that conclusion. However, we're going to the same destination.
Yes, I agree in principle with that, but not fully. And the reason why I say I'm not fully, if you're driving from point A to point B, driving it from point A to B, it's an objective something which is a straight, whatever the case might be. But if your research is based on, let's say, quantitative analysis, your research, and you ask questions which is subjective, the results that you will get, even if you ask the same sample, will not be the same. Even if you do something repetitive, you're not going to get the same answer.
No, fair enough, because
that's the only principle. So in principle, I agree with what you're saying. If you ask the same question, and it's based on objective facts, you will supposed to get the same answer, and that will be more reliable.
I see.
But if it is then subjective, you can ask and you do the same recipe at the same time, but the answer you won't get the same answer. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that answer is not reliable.
I agree with you 100%. And I think what you're saying is, if the instrument and the subjects or the participants, things have changed there, the instrument is not objective enough, you will still get the answers, but they may not necessarily be valid. I mean, for the principle reliability and stuff, because you are not just asking questions for the fun of it. You are asking questions because you want to answer a particular scientific question. No, I agree with you. I fully do. I hear you now.
Okay, but at least I started off maybe at 0. Now I'm sitting at least at 55 or 60%.
No, you are good. No. Now you're good, because you say to me there must be objective. I mean, everything being equal. You say if everything is equal, the results will be the same. Now, when the results are not the same, there's something that did not go right. One could be the instrument, 2 could be the selection criteria, the whole range of factors. And I agree with you there 100%. It's actually the simpler way that you've put for me, that this is how we should have framed the reliability and the validity question. I think you made it much more easier for me. Thanks,